Welcome to the Breakaway Entrepreneur Podcast, where master business coach Janet Fish and her special guests explore the characteristics and traits that lead entrepreneurs to success. Get ready for real conversations of what it takes to overcome real challenges and break away from your competition. Here's your host, Janet Fish.
Thanks, Ben. Now a word from our sponsor, Ross Rushton. If you're considering purchasing a new home and want a complimentary 30-minute pre-approval consultation, text the words home loan to 408-799-6853. Ross Rushton is a California licensed loan officer with Fairway Independent Mortgage, and he's awesome. I've spoken in the last couple of weeks to a number of folks who have been furloughed, or they're out of work, or they're just worried that their jobs will never come back. And I get it. If you're one of those, you're really not alone. If you've ever considered starting your own business, I'm here to help you. I've helped over 1,000 clients build successful businesses with my proven step-by-step process. Get started today building your own successful business. You literally can have a business up and running in a couple of weeks following my proven 5-step plan. And guess what? You don't have to invest anything to get started. That's right. You can start your business with no money. Go to www.breakawaybusinesscoaching.com/5steps right now. What have you got to lose? It's absolutely free. I met Doug Sandler with Turnkey Podcast Production as I was trying to figure out what to do next with my podcast. I had published around 30 episodes, and I wanted to take it to the next level. Now, just a few short months later, my podcast is making money, and I've discovered a number of new ways to grow and monetize it. Yes, you really can make money with your podcast. Doug is an entrepreneur and a podcast industry leader. He has built a community of podcasters that share and support each other. In today's episode, we talk about everything podcast. Should you start one? How to get started? Where the industry is going? And my favorite, you can make money with a podcast. I hope you enjoy our chat. Good afternoon, Breakaway Entrepreneurs. This is Janet Fish with the Breakaway Entrepreneur Podcast. And today I'm super excited. Well, I'm always excited about my guests, but today I get a little extra excitement because today I'm talking to Doug Sandler, and I'll tell you a little bit about him in a second. But my excitement comes from, as I was just telling him pre-show, I rarely get to interview people whose subject line is so interesting and compelling to me. So I get to pick his brain, and I'm super excited about it. So welcome, Doug.
Well, thanks, Janet. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, this is super exciting for me. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Doug. Doug is an entrepreneur and podcast industry leader. His book, Nice Guys Finish First, is a #1 ranked Amazon bestseller. As a podcast host of the Nice Guys on Business, Doug has interviewed Gary Vee, Arianna Huffington, John C. Maxwell, and dozens of celebs. Doug is a nationally recognized speaker, writer, and founder of Turnkey Podcast Productions, providing podcast production, editing, and launch services. His Nice Guys podcast, with over 1,000 episodes, has been downloaded 3.5 million times in more than 175 countries. I mean, that is awesome. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Janet. I'm excited to be here and humbled by your kind words. And the intro was written just as read just as my mom had written it. So thank you very much.
Well, it's impressive for sure. So let's just start out by and I want to know, but let's just start out by when and how did you get into podcasting?
It was completely out of desperation. In 2013, I wanted to reinvent my career. I had spent 30 years as a bar mitzvah MC, believe it or not, in the Washington, D.C. marketplace. And making the transition out of that career was challenging for me because I had so much experience in it. And I was literally making an amazing living one day a week, but I really felt like I hadn't made a significant impact on the world. So I wanted to make that transition. Boy, did I know my timing was perfect in doing that, getting out of the live events industry 7 or 8 years before COVID struck. Had a chance in 2013 to start the reinvention, became a professional speaker, started focusing on building a business of teaching people how the insides and outs of customer service and sales training, and made a really good career in that. And when I wrote my book in 2015 called Nice Guys Finish First, I was looking for a way to promote it. So I say out of desperation, just tongue in cheek, because I didn't want to spend the money that I would have needed to on a publicist or a PR company. They're, $2,500 to $5,000 every month to promote something. And I'm like, hey, this thing called podcasting, it's getting kind of popular. I might want to jump into this and try. So I talked to a buddy of mine, Strickland, who was represented in a band by the same agency that represented my DJ business. And we started this thing called the Nice Guys on Business podcast. And the rest is history. My career as a speaker went well, but as a podcast producer was even better because people were asking me more oftentimes about, hey, can you teach me how to launch a podcast, rather than, hey, can you come out and talk to my organization about customer service? So I guess it came out of the response to my community of getting involved in podcasting.
So it's interesting how the universe kind of leads us in directions that we never even think about. And I think
100%.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people experiencing that right now if they're letting themselves let the universe in rather than get out of all that fear and stuckness that they might be in, and let the universe kind of guide them to something that new and exciting. So I love that. How did you get your podcast? So I get it. You've been doing it a long time. You've got 1,000 episodes. How did you get your podcast to 3.5 million episodes downloaded?
Geez. Well, the crazy part about that is that, when you're on iTunes, or Apple Podcasts now, it was just iTunes before, you're a very small fish in a huge pond. And what was happening was we noticed that we were getting some downloads from this platform called Overcast. And I had never heard of Overcast at the time, but it's another podcast player. It's just an app, just like Apple. And we discovered we were like in the top, I don't know, let's just call it the top 20 of Overcast business shows, which is a really highly coveted category because it includes things like NPR and Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins and all the big names. And so we thought, hey, if we really put all of our energy into promoting ourselves on Overcast, we can become a big fish in a small pond rather than a small fish in a big pond on Apple Podcasts. And that's exactly what we did. And we drove hard in getting everybody that was listening on Overcast to rate and review us, or at least rate us, which is a star on Overcast. And so we quickly rose to the top of that chart because no one was paying attention to Overcast. They were all paying attention to Apple Podcasts in those other shows. So for us, we just kept saying, promote, please review us. And we became the #1 business show on Overcast for probably close to a year. And what was great about that was the higher we were ranked, the more exposure we had. So it kept feeding into itself. And we started to notice that our download numbers were going from, they were going from like 100 downloads an episode, or really we started at 7 downloads an episode. So it went from 7 to 10 to 100 in a few months. And then within 17 months or 18 months, we had about 20,000 downloads, which is good. But this is when it really took off, because that's when we really started to lean heavily into Overcast. We went from, in the same time it took us to get to 20,000, we went to 1 million on Overcast. And then from the same time it took us to go to 1 million, we went to 2 and then 3 and then close to 4 million where we are now, it's incredible. So it was just understanding what we had our hands on, even when we didn't realize what we had our hands on.
Yeah, that's great. Looking at for different ways to promote, so you're not competing against all the other guys that are in the Apple Podcast, like you said. So that's awesome and amazing. But a lot of us aren't there. And You talk a lot about don't focus on the numbers, right? Don't focus on the number of downloads, but just really focus on you said something that I thought was so brilliant and made me feel so much better when I look at my downloads. Like you said, I'd rather have 35 people who listen to every episode and are dedicated to my podcast than to have 10,000 people who aren't. So talk to us, give us some idea of what really to look at, and give us some hope for those of us who don't have 3.5 million downloads yet.
And I appreciate you saying that. And this is really where I stress that the numbers aren't of value at all. I mean, we had a highly unengaged audience of several thousand people every episode that were listening to our podcast, but we couldn't get them to do anything. They weren't engaged, and which is why we got to 1 million downloads and made exactly $0. We had no money coming in the door. And so what I always tell my new clients is you can't take a download to Wells Fargo and cash it. And the reality of that is that downloads aren't worth a hill of beans if you can't convert your audience members into actually a known entity, which was getting them to give you their name and their email address so you can actually market stuff to them that they want. So when it comes down to it, I'd much rather have an audience of 50 that show up every week that are highly engaged than an audience of 50,000 that aren't doing anything. And it really doesn't take more than a handful of people in your community. If there's hope for those podcasters that are getting 10 and 20 and 50 downloads an episode, the reality of that is that it only took one of our community members out of probably those thousands. One community member reached out. His name is Lou Diamond. I don't know if you've even met Lou, or you might have heard his name, me mention it before. But Lou is in our community, and he came to us through our community, and he said, hey, look, I know you're a professional speaker. I know you're an author. I know all these things that you do, and that stuff is great, but I don't want any of that. Can you teach me how to do what you've done with your podcast? I said, okay, and I was honest. I said, Lou, I've never done this with anybody before. I have no idea how much to charge you. And I don't really have it documented. So if you'll help me create that system, then I will absolutely train you to do that. And so we spent 6 months, I think at $500 a month. So about $3,000 to launch his podcast and go through the process. It doesn't take 1,000 people in your community to say, hey, help me. It just takes one, and it takes you listening to what they're asking you to do. You know, if you're a podcaster and you keep throwing products at your community and you're like, hey, I'm a professional speaker, well, silence. Oh, hey, I'm an author, and silence, or selling a couple of books, or hey, I'm a coach, and they don't respond to that. You've got to at some point say, who's the fool here? You know, the community for not reaching out because I'm so amazing at all this other stuff. And my ego was so much in the way that I'm like, oh, well, they have to buy this because this is the stuff I've created. Instead, ask your community what they want. Somebody will tell you what they want, and they will buy it from you because they're listening. They come every time you put out an episode. Why wouldn't they want to hear more from you? Absolutely.
I mean, I always say it's all about finding the problem that people have that you can solve. And for a lot of us, well, I won't say us because I'm still doing kind of what I was doing before COVID. But for a lot of people that are my clients, they're looking to find new problems to solve because the problems that what they were solving before, either they can't solve because they can't do it, or some of those problems have changed. So I think it's really important. And it's like I said, I will say again, I just love the fact that you didn't say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to launch a company producing podcasts. Oh my gosh. Right.
The challenge is that so many people come into this world and the online space for that matter. The online space is one where if you are not responsive, you will not get if you're not responsive to your community, they absolutely will not respond to you. So why would you want to come into it with the idea of, here are the 7 things that I have on my plate? Like every online course that we've created has been created because somebody in our community says, this is what we want. And then they come closer to you by giving you their name and their email address. They come closer to you by spending $1, even $1 is a show of trust. So they spend $1 with you, and you've created a small program, or you've given them a freebie for nothing, and you build that know, like, and trust factor until you figure out what it is that they want through asking. You put master classes together, you create online courses based upon coaching calls that you've done, like we have done, right, on using our podcast launch formula. There are so many ways that you can do it without having to create this arsenal of content that costs you time, money, energy. You're going to respond to your community. It's a matter of whether you do it correctly or not. Respond to them with the stuff that they want, and you will succeed. Respond to them with the stuff that you want, and the chances are slim that you're going to succeed because you're only one person in the many that are going to be listening.
Yeah. And I think too many people get caught up in, I'm going to go produce all my products and things, and then I'm going to launch.
Yeah.
Rather than, the best way to do it, which we've all done, sell something and then go and create it. I've done that a lot in my career.
It's ultra scary as an entrepreneur to think about product creation, being a visionary, being an innovator, coming up with a product based upon what your community wants, selling it, and then like, oh my God, I got to come up with a deliverable now. But 9 times out of 10, if you don't do it that way, you won't succeed at bringing your product to marketplace. So you may as well listen to them, understand that you're going to be bad before you're good, over deliver to them. So don't over promise, under promise, over deliver. And that's the beauty of it. You know, it's like when you guys hopped into our ultimate podcast launch form, or your next level podcasting, we kind of made the program up as we were going along based upon what we knew that you guys were saying. Hey, we want this. And so we've created other products, and we've created modules and videos and downloadable documents and all this stuff that you guys were asking us for. And that's truly the best way to go, because we know you want it.
Yeah, I was just going to plug that. I was going to say, I mean, I found you because I didn't go through the ultimate what is it? Podcast launch formula.
Sorry.
I wish I had, because it would have saved me probably months and months and months. But I found you because I was looking for what am I going to do with my podcast next level? And I could tell, because I create content and all of that it was created because of the need. And then you just went and created it because every week, what do those guys need this week? Okay, we better sit down and create the content. And that's the smart way to do it. Well, and it'll grow as we give you more feedback on, and I'm the first one to be giving you feedback.
I know. And you're wonderful. It's great because, you're the inspiration for many of the things that come next. Next level podcasting came as a result of, we've put almost 200 people through our podcast launch formula. And at the end of that, they now have a podcast, and everybody was like, now what? It's like, yeah. Okay, they can create content, but now what? Okay, monetization, guest management, influence building, those things are the key elements in how to actually take this thing that you've created and become successful with it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that a little bit more, but my question, and I'm sure there's a ton of people out there listening. So my question is, launch a podcast, why or why not?
So the online space right now is pretty crowded, and the podcasting space, while you may think it's crowded and may think there's no room because there's all this competition in it for you, that's just not. That's a myth. There's plenty of room for everybody. Even us podcast producers are friends with each other because we help promote each other's programs, because honestly, only 2% of the people on my list are ever going to buy from me. So I may as well share my list with somebody else so that we can either make an affiliate commission, or we just support everybody. A rising tide, raises all ships. So for me, podcasting is a great way. It's a great tool for business development, lead generation. It's a great way to introduce yourself to JV partners. It's a great way for you to discover what it is that your community wants. And if you want to become an influencer in a space, in a particular industry, I can't think of a better way to do that than through podcasting, especially when we're all at home right now. Nobody's out having meetings and pressing flesh. Nobody's doing that right now. So you may as well have a high visibility piece, and you can do it through podcasting, and it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg either, which is why we've created some of our more automated systems and our group coaching, as opposed to one-on-one coaching for some of this, because we've brought it to a level where pretty much anybody can be a podcaster. If you have the desire and you have the business, or even if you don't have the business but have the desire, we can work out the tools. You don't even have to have a specific industry in mind. We can make you, or help make you, an expert in any industry that you want to be an expert in, just by the strategy that we'll put into play.
So talk about how you help entrepreneurs launch a podcast, and I want to toot your horn in that it's a 6-week program. So I start with nothing, and in 6 weeks, I'm launching a podcast.
Yeah, and really only 4 of those weeks are weeks that you're actually doing any kind of work. We just give you a little rest before launch time, because we know that there's still going to be work after you launch a show. I think the critical element in launching a podcast is many people are held back just by things like, hey, I don't understand technology, or I don't have a personality, so I'm not really sure how I'm going to host a show, or I don't have a big list already, so what am I supposed to do? Where am I going to find my list? Or I don't have a product to sell, or one that I think a community is going to buy, so what am I supposed to do? And so the first thing that we do is we have to get into your brain and reduce those limiting beliefs that hold you back from starting a podcast. Then, before we can even get to where you are, which is at this next level, okay, now I have a podcast, now what? We've got to build the podcast. So we've got to build the shell of the show. We've got to create this thing we call a template, which consists of things like your podcast title, your cover art, your show description, your open and your close, your royalty-free music. We've got to connect you with iTunes and Apple Podcasts and other sources. We've got to get you a hosting source so that you have the technology behind you. We have to teach you about the equipment and how to learn how to use a microphone. I mean, those are critical elements. And if you let the fact that you don't have a community get in the way of that, building the podcast thing, it's like you'll never get started. So we always tell people, just get out of your own way for a moment, put that stuff on the shelf, and let's just work on some of the mechanics. That other stuff, the actual success part, that will come in the next phase, the success of building an audience, building a product, building influence. All of that stuff comes next, but we can't do any of that stuff without the shell or the template of your show.
Yeah, and I would say that I was shocked at how much fun this is. I mean, I knew that it would be good, and I did it because I wanted to expand my reach and, all of the things that you had talked about, but I had no idea it was going to be, first of all, as fun as it is. And then it wasn't until I met you through Next Level Podcasting that I really realized that I could make money with it, right? I mean, I've made money with sponsors, and I've obviously gotten some clients from it, but I'm now promoting products. And so, I mean, it is just absolutely amazing. So, but I do want to touch on that phrase, or that idea of monetization, because people either think I'm going to start a podcast and all this money is going to come in. Right. Or they think I'm going to start a podcast and I have no idea if I'm ever going to make any money from it. So I love you've got some types of monetization. So talk a little bit about that so people understand that they can make money from a podcast.
Yeah, and there's a couple dozen ways that you can actually make money via podcasting. The first way that we really work on, because I realized after we started our podcast and we started to make money, and we kind of skipped all of the smaller money, meaning the $1,000 and the $500, and we went right to the $20,000 and $30,000 mark, because we're like, we've got to figure this out. It took us almost 2 years to figure that part out. But we realized after we put your group through the Next Level Podcasting side of things, it is not, certainly it's great to have the $10,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 wins from your show. But man, how cool is it to see that first dollar come in the door? And how cool is it to be able to see that first $250 or $500 or $1,000? So now, instead of just focusing on the $10,000 and $20,000 wins, which have a longer tail, it takes a little bit longer to get there, we want to focus on the immediate win. How can we get you in a position where, let's say your podcast, after you're all in, and maybe you hired an editing company or a VA to do some stuff, and you got a social media person, or maybe you're doing it all yourself and just paying, $50 or $100 to have your show out. If I could show you a $50 or $100 win, and now you're in the black as opposed to being in the red, now all of a sudden the pressure is off from your. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and she was like, "We've been podcasting for 7 years. It costs us about $250 a month to have our show, produce our show, because they're doing most of the stuff in-house." And she's like, and in 7 years, we've never made any money. And we get about 50,000 downloads every month. So first thing that goes off in my head is you have a totally unengaged community, because you have a call to action that isn't working, or you have no call to action. So aside from going that direction, I tell everybody, let's just get you a win. Let's find a sponsor for you, maybe for a couple of episodes, just so you can see what it feels in the door. And if I can show somebody how to get 500 or 1,000, now if I show them how to do it twice, now they say, "Oh, I've done it once. That was by luck. If I've done it twice, I've kind of got something going." When you do it 3 and 4 times and you then do it consistently, it's something that's duplicatable and you can do very often. And that's pretty cool, to be in the black and to be profitable, not just be in the black a little bit, but even if it's a few $100 or a couple $1,000s a month, that's a pretty cool little bit of income to be sitting on with a podcast.
Yeah. And one of the things that came out of that, I ended up with 5, as I mentioned, 5 sponsors, which I would have never even thought of. I went back to the previous guests, and then a couple of other people. But one of the things that came out of it that I didn't anticipate, and I'm super happy about, is the strengthening of my relationship with those 5 people who now have given me money to show up on my show, but now they are committed to my show. Like, they are part of the show. And I never even thought about the power of that until I engaged these people as sponsors, and now they're part of the show. And so I don't know, have you experienced that with the sponsors that you've been working with?
Absolutely. When somebody is invested in you, invested in sponsorship, they're invested in the results as well. They want to get an ROI from what they're putting their money into. So while I would love to say that I will promote for everybody that comes on the show just as heartily as I promote for those that have sponsored the show. So the people that invest in sponsorship are the ones that are most invested in the promotion of that episode. It's very rare that somebody would just sit back and say, hey, I've sponsored your show. What are you going to do for me? Now they want to help too. And if I give them the tools that they need to help me, then they'll promote it. So yes, I find the same thing. The people that are invested in the sponsorship side, $500 or $1,000 or $1,500 to sponsor our show, they're the ones that really help get it out the most. And I can see it in the results. If I look at my numbers, and forget the download numbers, but just look at the chart. The chart is those that sponsor promote more of their episodes. So it's like, hey, I'd love to get everybody to sponsor it. And I can show you, on a graph, those that sponsor actually have better results with popularity of their episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have two questions for you. One is, where do you see the podcast industry going?
Well, we're just at our infancy right now. When I started, almost 6 years ago, we were still at our infancy, and I thought it was too late at that point. John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn were getting millions of downloads for the episodes. Tim Ferriss was just getting underway, and I'm like, oh man, I think I'm too late for this. And if I think about the numbers, there are a billion blogs, billion with a B. So there's a billion blogs that are out there right now. There's a million podcasts. We just ticked over the million mark on Apple Podcasts. Of the million podcasts that are out there, only 30% of them have created an episode within the last 90 days, which leads me to believe that 70% of them are actually inactive. They've created their 10 or 12 episodes and they've gone away.
Yeah.
And so for me, 300,000 versus a billion, there's no competition between blogs and podcasting. Podcasting is at its infancy. And when I look at things like Spotify and Pandora going all in and spending $500 million on podcasting, I know that they are very invested in making sure that this world continues. And Apple recreated an entire platform from iTunes. They started Apple Podcasts because they realized they needed their own space for podcasting.
Well, not to mention Amazon's now in the space too. What is that?
Oh gosh, I even forgot about Amazon getting into the game as well. And that just happened, as of the recording of this, just a couple months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's next for Nice Guys and Turnkey?
Geez. Well, okay. So for Turnkey, I think where we're heading is we really want to do a full year approach with many of our customers. I think what oftentimes happens is people get into podcasting and then life takes over. And the reality of it is that when life takes over, people kind of put the podcasting on the shelf. So we're looking at it and saying, let's create a year-long program where we can actually not only hold our clients accountable, but we give them support and we give them one-on-one coaching and we give them absolute steps because everything evolves. Your show will evolve at a different rate than our show evolved. Yours will probably evolve faster than ours did because people understand the term in podcasting much better now than they did 5 or 6 years ago. So for us, we want to be able to walk through this journey with each one of our clients. And we feel like a mastermind or a year-long program is absolutely the way to go. As far as Nice Guys on Business, it's going to be business as normal. We've really struck a chord here with our community. And it seems like, I was looking back to the last 20 episodes. Of the last 20 episodes, I believe all 20 of them have been sponsored episodes. So it's like, I don't see an end for people hopping onto our show as sponsored only guest positions because it makes sense. The business model is we're making money this way. Why would I want to give up that coveted space? I could probably do 5 episodes a week again and have people sponsor every episode. But that's not really that is a great way for me to pay for my show and the production and all that. But that's not where the big moneymaker is. The moneymaker comes from the relationships, as you mentioned earlier, the relationships that you're building through those sponsors and through those JV partnerships that you're building from that guest seat, from the community and the people out there saying, hey, this is what we want, from the private Facebook groups that we've created. That's where the big dollars come from. So the admin of running a show becomes secondary to the admin of running the business and the the idea behind let's keep introducing products and services that our community wants, rather than, okay, let's just keep taking sponsors. Sponsors are trading time for dollars, and you're going to run out of that pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that mastermind and learning more about it. All right, I believe you have something that you want to give away to our audience so that they can learn more about how, if they're interested in podcasting, how to do it right.
Yeah, and that's terrific. And thank you, Janet, for sharing that. Anybody that's in your community that is interested, let's just send them, let's give them a toolkit. The toolkit includes some downloadable documents so they can see things like our 5 ways to make money podcasting and secrets of top podcasters revealed. It also gives them an opportunity to step a little bit closer to us and seeing if podcasting is right for them. We have a free consult. You can hop on the phone with one of our Zoom now with one of our team members and see if podcasting is right for you. And if it's a good fit, we're happy to say, hey, this seems to be a good fit. We can't force anybody through this process. So if you get on the phone with us and we don't really think that podcasting is a good fit for you for whatever reason, then we'll be the first to tell you, hey, look, just let's talk about it in 6 months or a year from now. But right now, it's not a good fit for you. We do find that a lot of people are just not, they can't get out of their own way. So sometimes they're not ready to get rolling with it yet. So if that's the case, so hop on the phone with us or on Zoom with us and get the free downloadable documents, and we'll take it from there. It's turnkeypodcast.com/toolkit.
All right. So there'll be a link to it below. Awesome, Doug. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. And thank you, Janet. And congratulations on taking your show to the next level. Let's see what happens next.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty excited about that. All right, Breakaway Entrepreneurs, I just want to remind you that success starts with your mindset, but it takes massive action to get there. All right, Doug, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. We look forward to downloading the toolkit. I actually think when I first started, way back when, I downloaded a bunch of your stuff. I don't remember the toolkit, but I know I've looked at your how to be a good guest. So I was kind of stalking you before I actually committed to working with you, and it's been awesome. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We encourage stalkers. Thank you, Janet.
All right. Ben's going to take us out. Thanks so much.